Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to Hill Auditorium. Please rise for the presentation of our colors by the Washtenaw County Veterans Honor Guard. The playing of the national anthem will be performed by the University of Michigan Alumni Band. Please be seated. Once again, good evening and welcome to a very special celebration of Veterans Day 2015. My name is Steve Schramm, Executive Director of Michigan Radio, your NPR news station, and a proud member of the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor. Tonight, you are joining us for our inaugural event, Service Above Self, honoring our veterans. Our veterans serve our country selflessly, often in the face of great sacrifices and suffering. We are here tonight to honor that service. We hope to bring to you this evening an engaging evening of storytelling from fellow veterans who have found their own voice and are braving this mighty stage here at Hill Auditorium to share their story of service with you. We also have a variety of musical interludes between those stories. We thank the musical talents contributed by the University of Michigan Alumni Band, the Concordia University Choir, the U of M student a cappella group Dixon Janes, and vocal soloist Ann Arbor's own Catherine Larson and Concordia pianist Brian Altivo. Tonight's event was originally conceived by Brad Chick and Karen Carey of the Ann Arbor Rotary Club. With their leadership and inspiration, the entire volunteer organization behind tonight's presentation grew quickly to include the support of community leaders with the participation of the VA Ann Arbor healthcare system and a wide variety of veterans groups and organizations in the region. You'll find more information on those that helped bring tonight's program to reality in your program brochure. We are especially indebted to our 4 major event sponsors, the Mandel and Madeline Berman Foundation, Artis and Mike Chichella, the Masco Corporation, and the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor. Our pre-event reception hosts were Ashley's and the University of Michigan Veterans and Military Services. Our theme is Service Above Self, honoring our veterans, borrowing the Service Above Self phrase from one of the tenets of Rotary International. Based on that very simple core value, we are here this evening certainly to honor our veterans and also to bring forward the plan to mount an effort to bring a Fisher House to the state of Michigan. Fisher House is a home away from home for the families of serious ill or injured patients receiving treatment at VA medical facilities at no cost. Service members, parents, spouses, and other relatives, or anybody supporting seriously ill or injured inpatients at VA major medical facilities are eligible to stay at a Fisher House. It alleviates the stresses and financial burden of paying for lodging or worrying about where they will stay if an admission to the hospital is required. We can all take pride in giving back to those who have given so much to us and prepare to support those who serve and protect our country now and into the future. We'll have more information to share about the Fisher House and the needs to support the establishment of that Fisher House in a few moments. As we promised tonight, the storytelling is coming from those veterans who came home from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. We are proud to share these stories and thank our service members for their cooperation and the distinction of their dedication to our country. We will begin this evening's program with our first storyteller, Lori Dolph. Lori is a Vietnam combat veteran, a journalist, an advertising madman, and a consultant to captains of industry. I've had the pleasure of working with him as we plan this event and appreciate his enthusiasm for this project. Please welcome our first fellow veteran to the stage, Lori Dolph.
Good evening. It's been a beautiful Veterans Day. It's still 54 degrees out there tonight. But I'm taken back to a night 46 years ago in the Mekong Delta, Vietnam. The night had been a very intense time. I had been for 6 weeks beyond the fortifications of the post, out in what other wars called no man's land. We called it night ambush patrol. There'd be 11 of us. We're out there, no cover, trying to interdict the 2 or 3 enemy who would run in with mortar tubes, lob fast rounds into our base camp. It was 3 miles long, a mile wide. They couldn't miss. They would always hit something. They'd move, do it again, move, do it again, and run away. And so we would try to interdict them. And every now and then, we'd run into 400 of them, the 11 of us. And, well, the people before me were wiped out. I was a replacement in that company. But now, the night I'm thinking of, I'm inside the security of the base camp, and I've got a real bed and a real pillow and a blanket, except that it's twice the temperature it is tonight. About 110 at 2 in the morning, heavy humidity, so no cover. Really, 44 men in what we called our hooch, it was our barracks, 44 men wearing essentially nothing, listening to the helicopters surrounding the perimeter, big spotlights coming on, machine guns firing out the door of the helicopters, the minigun firing 6,000 rounds a minute, all trying to stop these continuous mortar attacks. And then the heavy fire of artillery, big, loud, intermittent, trying to also interdict these attacks, not shooting where the night ambush patrols were, that was always marked, but just shooting otherwise. And you would lie there, wide awake in your bunk, listening to all this, waiting for this fearful sound, which was the same frequency as the outgoing sound. And there would be silence, and then you'd suddenly hear, with no warning, "Woof!" And that was incoming. And we would shout, "Incoming! Woof!" And we'd be up and running, "Incoming!" And we were sprinting down the stairs. We had a bunker right next to us, a bomb shelter, if you will. And so we would run there to take cover, and on the way we would grab our M16s and bandoliers of ammunition so that when we got there, and we were not exactly dressed for combat, but we had about 500, 600 rounds apiece in case they came over the berm that night, and we were ready to engage. Whomp! And now we're huddled in the dark together, 44 men. Whomp! And there's the smell of perfume. And the sound of giggling. Whomp! Giggle, giggle. Whomp! Giggle, giggle. And this goes on for a while, and we hear that our barracks gets hit and starts to come apart. And then suddenly it all stops. It just all stops, and there's silence, and we wait a little bit, and we go out, and we find a tape recorder that someone had turned on, and it confirmed what we thought we had heard. Because as we wander out into the silence of that night, someone has left the transistor radio on, Armed Forces Network out of Saigon, a rock station, so there was a jock. And the giggling was of a USO dancer who had been caught crossing the base camp, getting caught in the attack, running for her life, finding shelter with us. So you heard all of that, and then you heard the transistor radio and the voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, the beat goes on."
Thank you to Laurie Dolph for his story of his service in Vietnam, and thank you to our University of Michigan Alumni Band for their rendition of America the Beautiful. We are very fortunate tonight to welcome distinguished guests of honor to share their thoughts with you on this Veterans Day 2015. It's my pleasure to welcome the Honorable Debbie Dingell, representing Michigan's 12th Congressional District. She was elected to the U.S. Representative Office 1 year ago in November 2014. Ms. Dingell previously served as an elected official during an 8-year term on the Wayne State University Board of Governors. Debbie resides in Dearborn with her husband, retired Congressman John D. Dingell of Michigan, who was one of the final 2 World War II veterans to have served in Congress. Please help welcome the Honorable Debbie Dingell. Our next special guest is Lieutenant Governor of the state of Michigan, Brian Calley. The youngest lieutenant governor in the 50 states, Brian Calley was first elected to his post in 2010. Calley has worked in partnership with Governor Rick Snyder to play an integral role in Michigan's comeback. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley.
It's our honor tonight to be together in a very nonpartisan way to salute our veterans. So we would now like to recognize those in the audience. If you are currently or have ever served in the U.S. Army, please stand if you are able.
Thank you. If you are currently or have ever served in the United States Navy, please stand if you are able.
If you are currently or have ever served in the United States Air Force, please stand if you are able.
If you are currently or have ever served in the United States Marine Corps, please stand if you are able.
If you are currently or have ever served in the United States Coast Guard, please stand if you are able.
Thank you so much for your service. We live in the greatest nation that the world has ever known, and we owe it to you. Thank you.
Our next storyteller tonight is Korean War veteran Robert Fletcher, better known as Fletch. He served in the last all-black Army regiment. It was so cold in the winter of 1950 that the unit's radios froze, and they did not get the message to fall back, leaving them stranded and without support on the mountain. Fletch was captured during a massive surprise attack as the Red Chinese entered the Korean War and was then held prisoner for nearly 3 years. He is a member of the Congressional Advisory Board for ex-POWs and is the past national commander for the American ex-POWs. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Fletcher.
Thank you very much. I see some friendly faces of people that know me for quite a while. I was 17 when I left school. I had about a half a semester to finish high school, but I figured I knew more than the teachers, so I quit. And my mother cried and said the biggest mistake you'll ever make was not finishing school. Well, back then, you know, you're a man at 17, and mothers have told you what to do for 17 years, and you want to be on your own. I went into service in May 1st, 1950. I had 4 to 5 weeks of basic training, no combat training. I then was signed to the Buffalo Soldiers, the last of the Buffalo Soldiers in Japan. I went to Japan. I was there about 2 weeks, or maybe 3. And one night we were called back to base. And we're told we had to go to Korea. And just about every single one of us said, "Where is Korea?" And the commander said, "Across the pond." Well, we loaded onto fishing boats. We didn't even have any LPVs or LSTs. We loaded onto Japanese fishing boats down in the hull and went to Korea. And please believe me, that is one of the worst smells you've ever want to get involved into. We landed in Busan. Then from Busan, we went all the way up to Seoul. And that's when we met the North Koreans. And we were thinking police action, nightsticks, no heavy combat. Well, they pushed us back to a little town called Yecheon, which is a fork off the main road. And we were told to hold at all costs. When we left, the mountain on the left, which we call hills, we call all mountains hills in Korea, because that's all there was. There were 39 of us still alive out of 250. We shoved down south, and we got back down to Busan. And General MacArthur said, "Gentlemen, you've made your last strategic withdrawal. Now you'll fight to the last man." And I looked at the platoon sergeant, and I said, "Well, we don't have many men. What the heck are we going to do?" He said, "We're going to fight." We got some replacements while we were there. And we fought. We made a maneuver. It's called left to right, if you've been in the military. And it was so successful, the Army used it up until a few years ago. That's where you strike the enemy to the left, pull back, go to your right, and come back around to your left. And when we did, they were paralyzed. They didn't know what to do. And by then, they had about a regiment or more down in a draw, and we totally wiped them out. That was the 5th, 6th, and 7th Regiment, North Koreans. They never were able to regroup. These are things that the press would not tell people back here because we were all black and we couldn't get the weapons we needed. I didn't know this. I thought the press was giving us all the hypes that we had coming, but they didn't, not one. Then they got Marines were going to be landing at Incheon, and our objective was to drive north to Seoul, cut the enemy off, and then pocket them and wipe them out. Well, they put on civilian clothes, and we couldn't tell them from civilians. The South Koreans could tell them by asking them certain questions, and I'm sure it's just like a person from England or down south. They've got an accent. And that's how they would tell them. We went north, and then we got orders to pull back down south. Harry Truman said MacArthur was campaigning to become president, and he wasn't doing his job, and a bunch of other stuff, so we were pulled back down south below the parallel. And we sat there for almost a month. Then we went back north. He said, oh, let's go up to the Yalu River, which divides China and North Korea. This was in the 1st of November. Now the evenings are getting a little crisp. And so we started saying, what about our winter clothes? Oh, they'll be in Korea, in Japan, waiting on you because you won't find any resistance. After 2 days of driving north, the lid came off. My unit and every other unit was totally surrounded. Our radios had frozen. The temperatures had dropped between 45 and 40 below zero. And you got to remember, we still got summer clothes. We fought approximately 5 days with the Chinese and ran out of ammunition, ran out of food. By this time, there was only 139 of us still alive. And then, it's amazing. The company commander said, our best survival rate will be to surrender. At least some of us might get back to the States alive. So we surrendered. The winter was then hitting us. The temperatures dropped between 50 to 55 below at night, and we always moved at night. We always stayed in bombed-out buildings. No blankets, no mattress, just the hard ground. We would go to bed at night and we'd get in a ball, like 4 or 5 of the guys on the perimeter would be frozen the next morning. And that's no joke. Our diet consisted of field corn, cracked corn, a small Asian bowl once a day. Once we got back to the camp, they brought in some other grains like millet. We never got rice till the summer of '52. But millet, sorghum cane seed, stuff of this sort that we don't even eat back here. We feed it to the canaries and to the chickens and other animals like that. But all this time of going back to that camp, walking with combat boots in icy mountains, it's like being on skis. You never know when you're going to fall. I fell and broke my ankle, tightened my combat boot up, and I didn't realize I had broken my ankle. Because the Chinese would say, leave the sick, we'll bring them up, but you never saw them. So we got to where we had put the sick in the middle, and everybody took a turn helping. And if the Chinese found out, they would make you leave them, but you never saw them again. So we would cover it up the best way we knew how. Actually, the summer of '52 was the best summer in prison camp because they brought us new uniforms with cotton, shoes. Some of us, our combat boots were wore out. You're walking actually almost barefooted. Well, after the war was over and I came home, out of that 139 that was captured, only 39 of us survived it. Out of that 39 today, there are 4 of us left alive. Because they're, I guess, like I am, and I'm more fortunate than others, that my wife keeps a good eye on me, and when I start to get sick, to the VA hospital we go. And if they don't have a wife who is that way, then they get too sick, and then the VA can't do them any good. I came home. People say, well, the Vietnam veterans and the Iraqi veterans are the homeless. Well, people, that is bull. I came home from Korea and I couldn't stand to be in a house. I don't know why. I slept in my car. I ate whatever I could find. I was lost because I didn't know who I was. I was 20 years old and acting like I was 17. who am I? People who have never been incarcerated for any long length of time, you know who you are. But if you get to be in a concentration camp or prison camp or in jail for a long, long, long period, you lose that. Especially when you're young, because you don't know who you are anyway. I slept in my car. One day my mother showed up and she says, "Why haven't you been home in 3 weeks?" I looked at her and I looked down. She says, "I taught you better than that. Don't look down, look at me." I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, you're coming home now." Those walls, that house had something, I don't know what it was. Then I met my wife many years later. We got married, and I was working every day, and we raised a family together. 3 girls, a boy, and then we adopted another boy. And she kept saying, "You're like Jekyll and Hyde. What is wrong with you?" I didn't know. I thought I was normal. She said, "You scream at us," and then 2 minutes later, it's, "Come on, let's go to the Dairy Queen." And I couldn't find any bearings for it. And then one day she came home and she says, "The VA's got a post-traumatic stress program they're starting." I said, "Well, if you need to go, because I don't need it." She said, "Well, I thought maybe we'd go together." Now, I know my wife, she's very, very persistent, but she does a bit at a time. She doesn't grab it by the whole, a bit at a time. So I started going. Well, I didn't start going. I was on a fishing trip with a friend up in Lansing, and on my way home, I got lost. Mentally, I got lost. And I stopped along the highway, and I looked in my glove box, and I said, "You know what?" to myself, "If I had a gun, I'd kill myself. I can't take this." When I got home, I walked in the house. The wife looked at me and says, "What is wrong?" I said, "If I had a gun, I'd kill myself." "Why?" And I said, I don't know. Well, she talked me into going over to the VA the next day, and with Wayne Byram, who works there. And it's been 15 years I've been seeing a psychiatrist there at the VA. It's made a different person out of me. I now think clear. I still sometimes get those, I don't know what you call them. A couple times I've snapped at her and she says, "Why?" And I catch myself. I don't like that, but I don't know what it is. It's there. Really, we have a farm, 16-acre farm, and it's been a good life for both of us and the kids. I would go back to Korea if another war started and I was young. Because the one thing I've learned, freedom is not free. Somebody's got to pay for it, either there or we'll pay for it here. And I hear people say, "Oh, the ISIS." Well, don't do anything, and we'll be fighting right here in this country, believe me. And I thank you very much for your time.
fight 'em all. A seven-nation army couldn't hold me back. They're gonna rip it off, taking their time right behind my back. And I'm talking to myself at night because I can't forget. Oh, back and forth through my mind behind a cigarette. And the message coming from my eyes is leave it alone. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Oh yeah. Leave it alone. Don't wanna hear about it. Every single one's got a story to tell. Everyone knows about it. From the Queen of England to the hounds of hell. And if I catch it coming back my way, I'm gonna serve it to you. Yeah. And that ain't what you wanna hear, but that's what I'll do. And the feeling coming from my bones says find a home. Find a home. Find a home. Find a home. And the feeling coming from my bones says find a home. Find a home. Find a home. Yeah. Go back home.
Thanks to the U of M student a cappella group Dixon Janes for their rendition of Seven Nation Army. The group is comprised of students of several of U of M's schools and colleges and was founded in 1998 as a music ensemble that would not only perform contemporary a cappella, but would also explore other musical tastes that were less mainstream here at the university. We're pleased that they could be with us tonight here at Hill Auditorium. Our next storyteller is a woman who has flown on Air Force One attending the president. Greta L. Krapel, RN and PhD, rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel while serving 2 decades in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps, including an assignment at the White House Medical Unit. For 2 years, she traveled with the President and First Lady as part of an advanced team on Air Force One. Her husband, Graydon, served 30 years in the United States Marine Corps as both active and reserve. Today, she is Director of Clinical Operations for the Michigan Surgical Quality Collaborative. Please welcome Greta Krapel.
One of the greatest things about the military and the greatest stressors is you never know where you're going to be or where you're going to be doing from one day to the next. In my 2 decades in the Army, I've been stationed many places, from Honolulu, Hawaii, to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I've been to every state in the United States, except Alaska, and I've been all over the world. So when the Army Assignment Branch called me up and said, would you be interested to compete for an assignment at the White House Medical Unit, I did not hesitate. This seemed like an opportunity I could not pass up. Most people don't even realize that the president has a medical team, but when you think that the most powerful man in the world, truthfully, his health and safety is paramount. So that unit is comprised of Army, Navy, and Air Force medical personnel, and the mission is to provide comprehensive medical care to the first family, the VP, and the first family, the VP, the president, wherever and whenever they need it. So I show up at the Pentagon, and there's a lot of people just like me. men and women with a lot of intensive care nursing under their belt, and lots of initials and certifications after their name. ICU nursing, field nursing, emergency room nursing, trauma nursing. But it all came down to this. Who could pass the top secret security clearance is what then was considered a black book assignment. Well, I did. People say to me, they say, Greta, how did you get that job? And I answer truthfully when I tell them, I think I was the only one that passed my security clearance, because it was tough. But my husband says, he goes, Greta, you're either a very good person or a very boring person. So I did end up getting the job. So one of my first days on the job, I was standing at the Rose Garden, and President Clinton was announcing the rescue of Air Force Captain Scott O'Grady, a fighter pilot who was shot down in Bosnia a week earlier. And as I stood there, it was surreal. I almost felt like I was going to faint at the sheer realization that I was at the White House. So I did not faint, but I went home that night and I told my husband, I said, Graydon, I just dodged a very embarrassing day on my first day at the White House, but he was very reassuring. And he gave me a good pep talk. He gave me a dose of confidence and an admonishment to move my legs whenever I'm standing upright. And that was really good advice. Then I needed that pep talk because a few days later, the president needed a routine blood sample. And this was like my first week on the job. So the Secret Service ushered President Clinton into the medical unit, which is adjacent to the diplomatic reception room. The medical unit. So you bring him in, and I'm getting everything ready, and I put the tourniquet on, and I got his antecubital site, and I get the needle and the syringe, and I'm getting ready to get his blood, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and he says, Greta, do you know how many people would want to be in your position right now with a needle and getting ready to take all my blood? So that made me smile, dissipated. I was probably shaking a lot, and I did get that sample. It helped me get it quickly. So as I continued to orient to the position at the White House, I learned about the other military positions that support the White House operations. The Marines run the HMX helicopters, the Air Force with Air Force One and all the transport planes, the Army with the White House Communications Agency, the Navy with all the food and the stewards, the Navy mess, and the military aides to the president. There's one for each service: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. Distinctive because they wear their dress uniform and they carry the distinctive football, the nuclear codes, launching codes that never are far from the president. So when I oriented with the military aides, they said, listen, Crapel, 3 things you got to remember on this job. 1, keep your sense of humor. 2, you're easily replaceable. And 3, remember where you came from because you're going back. And I thought that was really good advice on that assignment. At times, the job was physically and emotionally demanding. It was a grueling travel schedule interspersed with a whole lot of sitting around, many times at golf courses. But you had to stay in a state of high alert, and you had to be ready to respond, even with sunscreen. Remember, every time the president leaves the White House, it's a real-world mission. Something as seemingly simple as a trip across town or jogging requires contingencies, planning, vigilance. When the president would go on trips, we'd go out ahead of the president on the advance team with the Secret Service and make sure everything was coordinated for emergency contingency planning. On Air Force One, we would ride as part of the medical unit on Air Force One, and there in the medical unit, we actually had an operating room you could pull down, and we could perform surgery if needed right there on Air Force One. If he was at home in the residence, we would stay about every 3rd to 5th night. The nurses would stay there in the operations center just in case anything was needed. So we did a lot of planning. It can get downright boring sometimes to do that, all the contingencies, and you never really actually have to put them in play until you do. We were down in Florida. The president had a lot of events. He had some fundraisers. It was hot. It was late. We dropped him off at the professional golfer Greg Norman's house. And the doctor stayed with him, myself and some of the staff. We were at a hotel nearby. I'm just starting to relax, and I hear over the radio, "Eagle down," and then silence. Silence is never good. Then the Secret Service came, knocked at my door. The president was injured. I didn't know how bad the president was injured or what had happened, but all I know is that our contingency plans in an instant went into play. It was lights and sirens down into the local hospital that we had just been there the day before. The fastest I've ever gone in a car, ever in my life. And it ended up the president's injury was not life-threatening, but very painful, and he ripped a tendon in his quadriceps in his right knee. He was going on a stairway, and he tripped over, missed a step. But we ended up getting him stabilized, and we took him back to Bethesda Naval Hospital for surgery. I will never take good contingency planning for granted, ever. In the assignment, I was able to be witness to history on several events, but the most memorable event for me was when the President of the United States took out time from his busy schedule to meet my mother and father. My dad, a former enlisted Army soldier, high school teacher, wrestling coach, my mom, a social worker. President Clinton was very gracious about taking time out to meet the families. We love having, insert name here, Greta at the White House. But seriously, that is a day that we still remember and that I am very grateful for. And the president did that a lot. I saw him turn around an entire motorcade one time to go to a child's lemonade stand. You learn things from every assignment, but this is what I learned from this one. That the United States is indeed a great country. I've seen several countries now, and I see the big palaces where their leadership is. In the United States, I see the White House, the House of the People, modest in comparison. I also learned that every patient is a VIP. You learn that in nursing school, that every patient's a VIP, but until you've taken care of the first family, nothing much gets you rattled. My next assignment at Fort Bragg, they said, "Greta, the general's coming up." I was like, no problem. I got this. The other thing is, don't believe everything you read or that you read in the newspaper or watch on TV. Sometimes I would be at the same event, and I was like, I can't believe this is what the event that I was actually at. Also, know where the exit and escape routes are, but more importantly, the bathrooms. And finally, have a plan B and a plan C. One of my last days on the assignment, I stood in the diplomatic reception room where President Roosevelt did his fireside chats. And I looked out of the south portico, and over the ellipse, I could see the Washington Monument over here, and I could look straight through the tidal basin and see the Jefferson Memorial, right in a straight line all the way through. And as I stood there, I said, I will never, ever likely be able to see this view again. And as the Army would have it, you never know what you're doing one day to the next. A couple months later, I'm down at Fort Polk in the rain, in full battle rattle, you call it, looking at inside of a tent, looking at a view of porta potties. So that view was definitely a different view and a far, far away from the White House. But whether you were assigned to the White House or Fort Bragg, taking care of the President of the United States or Private Smith, one thing in military service stays constant, and that is the great people that you work with, your comrades. They come from all walks of life, all parts of the nation, coming together to accomplish a mission, and you forge the strongest of bonds. That, in my opinion, is what makes any assignment, wherever you are, presidential. Thank you.
To the beautiful sound of the Concordia University Choir with their performance of Lead, Kindly Light. Since the founding of Concordia Ann Arbor in 1963, the Concordia Choir has maintained a reputation of excellence in choral music and performs regularly both on and off campus. The Concordia University Choir is a select ensemble comprised of approximately 50 students from many academic disciplines of the university. Thanks again to this impressive choral group for their contributions to honor our veterans tonight. As our first speaker told us earlier this evening, we had it tough in Vietnam, but most of our forces did not have to endure the psychological agony of multiple tours of duty like our next storyteller. Personally, most of us cannot imagine going back again and again into combat in an endless war. But here is one of our many soldiers who was sent to Iraq and again. It's my great honor to introduce Brendan Lejeune, who served as a Marine in Fallujah and at the scene of some of the worst fighting in Iraq. He came home to earn a degree at the University of Michigan and a master's degree in war studies at King's College London. His story is the most recent and contemporary experience of our storytellers and was featured online in video as a part of Michigan Radio's Beyond the Battlefield series. Welcome to the stage, Brendan Lejeune.
It was just another day in Iraq when he was shot and killed. No dramatic battle was fought, no objectives were met. He was killed, and the war went on. We had just set up a patrol base in an Iraqi home once we forced the Iraqi family out until we decided to leave. We found places to lay our gear, 3rd Squad went on post, and the rest of us relaxed or got ready for our patrol. As I walked up to the roof, a single shot rang out. I thought nothing of it at the time. We had all been sniped at in this area before, and except when he winged one of our corpsmen, he always missed. The sniper was a joke to us. This time was different. The call for the corpsman went out. They were already with him by the time I got up there. I turned and ran down the stairs, yelling for all the drivers to get out to the trucks and get ready to go. My saw gunner and I started the trucks, and he backed his up to the door. While we waited, I reached under my flak and clutched the St. Patrick's coin that I always kept with me and still do. We all knew that he had been shot in the head. The wall around the roof was too high to have gotten hit anywhere else. Marines poured into the Humvees as they loaded him into my saw gunner's truck, and I took off driving the lead vehicle. The sniper must have been in the little market a few hundred meters down the road. As we came onto the road, the Iraqis scattered out of there thinking that we were coming for the sniper. One car tried to outrun us instead of getting out of our way as they knew they were supposed to. I yelled up to my turret gunner to shoot and get the car out of my way. And he yelled back, "You mean shoot the car or shoot the driver?" After the Battle of Fallujah, a seemingly endless stream of IEDs that wounded and killed my brothers, over a year in combat, I had, at this point, surrendered much of my humanity to fear and anger. So to my shame, to my shame, I yelled back, "I don't give a shit, just get that fucking Haji out of my way." My only thought at the time was getting our wounded brother to the surgical unit at TQ Air Base as quickly as possible. The turret gunner, of course, did the right thing. He first fired a flare at the car as the rules of engagement dictated. Only then did he fire a round into the back tire and the back bumper, forcing the car out of the way and off the road. We eventually reached TQ Air Base, and I remember the anger that I felt as we drove past a group of rear area troops. They were playing softball in civilian clothes, not a weapon in sight. Our brother was in the back of our Humvee dying as they played a game. I later learned that the men in the back of the Humvee with him had to hold the back of his skull together to keep any more of his brains from spilling out than already had. And our corpsman performed a miracle, keeping him alive. He gave him CPR the entire way there. Excuse me. He gave him CPR the entire way there as his body spit blood and mucus into the corpsman's mouth the entire time. After about 20 minutes after we finally got him to the surgical unit at TQ, the doctors came out and told us that he had passed away. They said that even if he had been shot on the operating table, he would have died. We wept. I hugged the corpsman as he repeated, I couldn't save him. I couldn't save him. Excuse me. I told the corpsman truthfully that if he couldn't, then no one could. I walked away from the others at that point, and I came to a sandbag wall, and I did my best to kick it down while I yelled how much I hated that damn war and that damn country. Later, they brought him out. They brought his body out in a body bag laden in the back of a truck, and we all gathered there, touching the bag for a moment. I touched the bag and I lost control. I turned to flee, and I ran into my old team leader, a very tall man, and I buried my face in his chest. And he hugged me as I kept repeating, he's in a fucking bag. He's in a fucking bag. I used to joke that we were like traveling bag people. We lived out of bags, we slept in bags, we ate out of bags. We went to the bathroom in bags, and we were put in bags when killed. It was no longer funny. My old team leader reminded me to be strong for his family, and I got a handle on myself. I once found him writing a love poem. I asked him who it was for, and he said, matter-of-factly, it's for the woman I love. Confused, I said, I didn't know that you had a girlfriend. And he said, I don't. Just because I haven't met her doesn't mean I can't write her love poems. That's the kind of man he was. He was 21. It was just another day in Iraq. Thank you.
Thanks to Brendan for his story and the reality and the rawness that most of our veterans face today. We will now wind back the clock to the time of World War II with a musical performance that is reflective of that period. Back then, the nation heard about the developments of the war from the radio in their homes. Also from that radio set came musical salutes to bring a patriotic theme to the programs of the day. Irving Berlin wrote our next song in 1918 while serving the U.S. Army at Camp Upton in New York. You'll know the song is the signature tune of Kate Smith from the 1940s and beyond. This evening it is our own Catherine Larson and her vocal performance, accompanied by Brian Altavote on the piano. Here is God Bless America. Catherine Larson, who happens to belong and is a proud member of the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor. We enjoy her voice at our lunches every Wednesday. Come and see her sometime. Our last speaker this evening is a fellow Rotarian as well, and has been applauded by thousands and booed by millions. And he has been in practically every home in America via television. Well, how is that? Well, he was a National Football League official, one of the most cursed yet anonymous men in the world. And contrary to popular belief, he is quite normal in other respects. He is president of his own company and has crisscrossed the United States countless times each year, speaking for business and professional audiences of all kinds. Art spent 15 years as a line judge in the NFL and wore the number 33 on the back of his striped shirt. He officiated 4 NFL championship games and Super Bowls 6 and 8. Even more notable, Art served in the Third Army under General George S. Patton as a first lieutenant and later as a captain, supporting the armored drive through Nuremberg and across Nazi Germany to reach the Austrian border when Germany surrendered. At 94 years old, Art is still every inch the combat soldier and an excellent representative of the greatest generation. Let's give a warm Veterans Day welcome to Art Holst.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was a great introduction. How would you folks like to be following Catherine Larson after that beautiful performance? Give her another hand. And to Fletch and Brendan and Greta, thank you all for being here. Yes, I am going to be 94 years old. Now you know why you feel old age creeping up on you. But now that I've passed 90, my whole life's upside down. I sit down to eat at night, I feel sexy, I go to bed, I feel hungry. Andrew Jackson, our 7th president, once said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." 75 years later, our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, said, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." November 11th was set aside by President Woodrow Wilson in 1919 after the close of World War I and the Congress of the United States of America to be Armistice Day, to recognize those who served, but especially those who have died in combat since the Revolutionary War and extending at that time all the way up through World War I. In the intervening years, we have changed that to Veterans Day to honor all veterans. And I pause for just a moment to pay attention to the United States Marine Corps, who celebrated their 240th birthday yesterday. A hand for the Marines. Well, it all started for me in Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, when in 1939, as a 17-year-old, along with 2 of my buddies, Bob Kemp and Leo Munson, we enrolled at Knox and also enrolled in ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps. We had been together, Bob, Leo, and I, since junior high school. We were inseparable friends. Junior high school, college, and then in July 1943, on active duty after having been sworn in March, we were permitted to finish our education. We went to basic training in July together. went from there to OCS in Fort Benning, Georgia together, graduated in 1943 together in December, and thence the three friends separated, as is part of what the Army is all about. Leo went to the 80th Infantry Division. Bob went to the 94th, I forget the division number that he went to, a different one. I was the lucky one. I was assigned to go to Camp Hood, Texas to train troops. But while we were going through basic training, I learned some things about the Army that I didn't expect to learn. We were learning how to take rifles apart and put them back together blindfolded. The tactics of being able to sneak up and kill the other guy, that's what the infantry was all about, to take towns and so on. But I also found that there are some other sides. There I learned about compassion. I learned about loyalty. And I learned that in the face of all of the things like Fletch and Brendan talked about, in the face of all that carnage and horror, there was a sense of humor. We came in from 2 nights in OCS, and that's a tough deal for 4 months. We came in after 2 nights out in the field, sleeping on the ground in some night attack problem. Tired, dirty, worn out, in the barracks. When our drill sergeant walked in and said, "Guys, I've got good news and bad news." He said, "The good news is you're going to have a change of underwear." He said, "The bad news is that Heber, you change with Hefter, Holst, you change with..." And there, that's okay. There I learned about loyalty. You see, as all of you veterans here so well know, this is one place that you learn that you are indeed your brother's keeper. The guy next to you, your life, may literally depend on him and his depending on you. And I want you to know I couldn't get out of here without telling a football story, since he mentioned it. You learn loyalty in football. 7 guys are the difference between that in strife at church, is the difference between that thing and being a game and a riot. And you take care of that other official. I worked a game in Chicago between the Bears, the Green Bay Packers. I called a clip against the Bears in the 4th quarter that took the winning touchdown away from them. Clipping is blocking from the rear, blocking from the side was not a clip, but this was an iffy one from in here someplace. I got torn apart in the papers on television. Well, a month before that, I had run into a friend of mine, a farmer, from up by Fairbury, Illinois, halfway between Peoria, where I lived, and Chicago. And he was a great Bear fan. He said, "Art, it's a great thrill to see somebody out there in the field that I know. If you ever want to come deer hunting, come on up." So a month later, after I made that call that beat the Bears, I said to the guys in the dressing room, I said, "Anybody want to go deer hunting, let me know." And Bob Frederick, our referee from Denver, said, "I'd like to go." He said, "I'll fly out Tuesday." So Bob flew out Tuesday, Wednesday morning. We were up, got the guns, drive to Fairbury, get there 5:45. I go up to the door and knock. The farmer came to the door, stuck his hand out and said, "Art, I want to tell you right now, that clip you called against the Bears was a great call. I don't care what the Chicago Tribune said." I said, "Well, thanks a lot." He said, "I'll tell you another thing. You got the best referee in the National Football League, sharpest signals, knows the rules." I said, "That's Bob Frederick, number 71. He said, "That's him." He said, "Tell him I said he's the best referee in the league." I said, "I'll do it." He said, "Will you do me a favor before you go out?" I said, "Anything you want." He said, "To see an old mule out by the barn, there's an old swayback mule out there." He said, "That mule's 26 years old, family pet, got cancer. I can't bear to shoot him. Before you go hunting, would you mind shooting my mule?" I said, "I want to shoot your mule. I came here to hunt deer. I can't miss that thing. He hadn't moved since I've been here." He said, "Well, you'll be doing me a favor if you shoot my mule." I said, "Okay, I'll shoot him." He said, "Thanks a lot. We'll have you a hot breakfast when you get back." I went out to the car, he went back in the house. On my way out there, my sense of humor got me. I worked myself up with the fake lather, got in the car, slammed the door. Frederick says, "What's the matter?" I said, "That old fool won't let us hunt." He said, "Won't let us hunt?" I flew from Denver. I said, "No, I saw that bear game." He said, "That clip I called was the worst call he ever saw. And worse than that," he said, "that guy that wears the white hat, that's you, buddy, was the worst referee in the National Football League." And when he said that, it was enough for me. I'm going to shoot his damn mule. I took my gun and I dropped that thing in one shot. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Before I could turn my head, I heard his gun go bang, bang. He said, "Art, I got 2 of his cows. Let's get out of here." Now that's loyalty, folks. And if you don't remember one other thing from this talk tonight, you remember that Art Holst asked you to go out of here and be a cow shooter. A cow shooter for your family, a cow shooter for your church, and a cow shooter for the United States of America. Because we are our brother's keeper. You see, Bob Kemp was going to be a doctor. He died in Belgium at 23. Leo was a great chemistry student. They were both real good students. I was not that. They were in the top 10% of the class. I was not even in the top half of my class. But I'm very proud of the fact that I was in that half of the class that made the top half possible. Now, Bob died in Belgium. About a week later, in November, the same month of November, Leo got hit with what we call the $1 million wound. The $1 million wound was one that would not ruin you for life, but would get you out of there and get you home. Leo got hit through the thigh and lived a normal life, died just a couple of years ago. So you see, in the midst of all the carnage and death, there was humor. And if you don't know it, Bob lies in Henri Chapelle Cemetery in Belgium. There are 24 American cemeteries scattered all around the world. 5 of them are in France, 2 in Belgium, 1 in the Netherlands. I won't go through all the rest of them. In addition to those buried here in the United States. A little over 96,000 Americans of every religion, every faith, every color, buried side by side. No diversity problems at all. As those crosses say to the world that the United States is not only a beacon of freedom, it is also a defender against evil wherever it rears its ugly head. So there I was in a unit in Germany. I got there after the Bulge as a replacement. I'm no hero. I want that clear. Just because I'm in the so-called greatest generation, no hero. I have never met a living soldier that thought he was a hero. The heroes are those men and women who lie under crosses, not only across the length and breadth of this country, but around the world. Those are the real heroes. So I joined the 3rd Army, a unit of the 3rd Army in Hanau, Germany. We were moving rapidly, and I'll go rapidly with this. We went through Frankfurt, Aschaffensburg, Würzburg, Nuremberg, where I stood when I had some time off and stood where Hitler gave his diatribe to 150,000 people in that stadium. And then south to Munich, and finished the war at a little town called Raubling, Germany, a mile from the Austrian border where the Inn River goes down to Innsbruck. My mission at that time was to follow up the troops, take the railroad station, and they had a plan for what you would do. I walked into the railroad station in Raubling, a little town of about, 1,500 people. And the station master was there. He seemed like an old man to me. I was 23. And he was actually probably in his middle 50s. He could not speak a word of English, and he was scared to death. They'd been told that we might come in and murder the old people, which is not true at all. He was scared to death. I couldn't speak it. My German was limited to Heißwasser, which is hot water, and Dankeschön, and Bitte, which is thank you and please. And that was the extent of it. You don't do very much in railroads, yards with those words. Into the room walked a young man in lederhosen, about my age. He said, I'm his son. I speak English. I said something like this. I said, tell your father that nobody's going to be hurt. My driver, a big Finnish guy from Minnesota, Hendrickson, was there. He had his carbine, 30 caliber carbine on his shoulder. I had my 45 in a holster and my carbine over my shoulder. He told his father in German, I said, tell your father that he'll get orders now from me or my men and what we're going to do here, but nobody is going to be hurt. And then the light lit. I thought, what is a guy this age? He looked about my age. Turned out he was 2 months different from me. What's he doing here when they need all these people? They were getting kids 16 years old in there. So I turned to him. I said, are you a member of the Wehrmacht? Are you a member of the German army? He hesitated and said, yes. I said, you're a prisoner of war. He said, yes. I said, are you armed? He said, yes. Where is your weapon? In the stove. Give it to me. He reached in the stove, pulled out a P-38. That's a 38 caliber automatic. Dumb me, I'm standing there with my gun in my holster, the other one over my shoulder, and Hendrickson had his weapon over his shoulder. Turned like this with the weapon, pointed it right at my gut, and handed it to me. I said, Steinbeißer, you're a prisoner of war. All I need is your name, rank, and serial number. He gave it to me, and he spoke real good English. Now, this is a matter of minutes. And I said, Steinbeißer, I need an interpreter. That's Dolmetscher in German. I need an interpreter. And I'd have never heard of anybody doing this, but instead of going to the prison camp, we had a prison camp about 20 miles away at Bad Aibling. Instead of going to prison camp, I'd like for you to be my interpreter because I have a hard time getting across to these railroad people. Now, you don't have to do it. I could take you right to prison camp. It's your choice. He looked at me and he said, I'd like to do that. I said, now listen, Steinbeißer, I've never heard of anybody doing this. I'm not going to guard you. I can't do that. I don't have the men. You're going to come home at night, take your prisoner of uniform off. I'll have a uniform for you, one of my men's fatigues with a P on the back and a circle around it. That's what we had for prisoners. And I said, I'll pick you up in the morning. But I said, if you leave me, my rear end is going to swing. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. He looked right in the eye at me and he said, Lieutenant, I'll never leave. We were together for 5 months. When anybody was around, I told him we're going to act like captor, captee. When somebody's around, but when nobody's around, we're going to be just two guys. I'd like to learn some German. I'd like to speak half German if I can and learn some German conversation so I can be a little bit conversational. We were together for 5 months. After about 8 weeks, I knew I'd broken every law in the book. I said to him one day, Carl, I got to take you to prison camp. Oh, no. I said, yep, tomorrow morning. You know, a friend of mine who's a speaker said, if you got a frog to swallow, don't look at it too long. So tackle a problem right now. So I picked the next morning I took him, went to prison camp, got there. There were thousands of people on that. You folks can't even imagine what it's like when 300,000 or 400,000 people surrendered to you in the same day. We got there, walked in, a major sitting there. He said, what can I do for you? I said, I got a German prisoner over here. He said, where has he been? I said, I kept him as an interpreter. He said, I never heard of such a thing. I said, I haven't either, but I did it. You know, it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is to ask permission. Now, I said, I kept him. He said, okay. He said, first thing he said, Lieutenant, we've been in a damn war. I never remember his words. I said, I remember it. I know I've been in it. So he got Carl's papers, and I looked at my watch. I remember this as if it were yesterday. I looked at my watch, and I said, at first I said, I need to have him out. He's very important to us. He said, how soon do you need him? And I said, I'd like to have him by noon. That's when he said, we've been in a war. I said, well, it's very important to us. He said, I've never heard of such a thing. I said, it's very important to us. He's the guy that understands this. He can get your supplies up here. You guys need supplies up. He speaks the language, writes the language, understands the railroad because his father's in it. And at 1 o'clock, Carl walked out a free man. He was with me till October. I got promoted to 3rd Army headquarters. But as Paul Harvey would say, here's the rest of the story. Because you see, 40 years later, almost to the day, I had a speech in Munich, Germany, for the International Convention of North American Van Lines. There for 4 nights. The second night, the night before my speech, I looked in the Munich phone book, which is like the New York or Chicago phone book, for Steinbeißer, and I found it. Steinbeißer, Carl, 9 Bad Bernigstrasse. Common name. Didn't know whether he'd be there, but I dialed it. Voice on the other end of the line said, Steinbeißer. I recognized his voice immediately after 40 years. I said, is das Herr Karl Steinbeißer? He recognized the accent. He said, who the hell is this? I said, it's Art Holst. He said, Holst, what are you doing here? I said, I'm in Munich. He said, what for? I said, I'm going to speak tomorrow. I'm at the Sheraton, and I want you and your wife down here. He said, my first wife died. We're both now 63 years old. My first wife died, and I'm remarried, and I've got to do something with my wife tomorrow morning. He said, I pick you up tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. Be out in front with your wife. So that day, that afternoon, at 2 o'clock, my old enemy picked us up, went to his house, had coffee, cookies, wine, went a little shopping together, had dinner together. You see, compassion and humor go along with all the carnage that we saw. Frankfurt, Nuremberg, Aschaffensburg, Würzburg, Munich, all of them were demolished. And then I'll add this briefly, because 2 days after the war, I saw a Jeep from the 45th Division stop this sergeant and said, have you ever heard of Lieutenant Robert Martens? He was my college buddy, had gone through OCS with us, and I knew he was with the 45th Division, as 15,000 men. And lo and behold, this guy said, yes, he's company commander of our heavy weapons company. He's been wounded a couple of times, but he's back. He gave me his field phone number. I called him. They had taken Dachau, or guarding Dachau. You had to have a State Department pass to get in there. He said, Art, you got to come up and see this. You won't believe it. I went up and spent the weekend. And it changed my life. I found out what evil can do. At the edge of a town that looks a great deal like Ann Arbor, Michigan, stood this camp, masqueraded as a factory, where hundreds of thousands of people died. And those prisoners were still there. This was just days after the war ended. Were still there. The real bad ones were in the hospital. A few that could get away and walked away, were able to walk away, did. But I saw those prisoners, and when people tell me that the Holocaust is a hoax, you want to infuriate me, that's the way to do it. Because I saw the people with my own eyes, the arms that big, the skin strips over the face, the hollow eyes. That's what evil can do if we don't have eternal vigilance. So here we are in this country that have sent young men out to find evil, not to take land, to find evil and to stomp it into the ground. So what is the promise of the United States of America? I think that promise was best said by a judge in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, giving citizenship in this great country to a group of people not by the accident of birth, but by choice. He said this: "You came into this courtroom a few minutes ago as citizens of various foreign sovereignties, German, Italian, English, Polish. Words will be spoken, a ceremony will be performed, and you will walk out as American citizens. In somewhat the same way as a man and a woman come to be married. Words are spoken, a ceremony is performed, and the whole lives of two people are changed. There's a new loyalty, a new obligation, a new hope." And then he said, "Do not be deceived. Every right begets a corresponding duty. We promise you the pursuit of happiness. We do not promise you happiness. We promise you equality of opportunity. We do not promise you riches. We promise you freedom of speech. We do not promise you wisdom. We promise you liberty. We do not promise you peace." That's the promise of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what 56 men signed their names to 240 years ago and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors to defend it. That precious document, the Declaration of Independence. Now, there are those who say that America is not exceptional. They are wrong. This nation is exceptional, whether we like it or not. Who was with an aircraft carrier off the coast of Thailand immediately to bring a floating hospital, medical supplies, food, fresh water? The United States of America. Who sends more medicine and more people to Africa to work on AIDS and Ebola than any other nation on the face of this earth? The United States of America. And who has more toilets per 100,000 people than any nation on the face of this earth? Are we perfect? Of course not. This is an imperfect nation, run by imperfect people, just like football is officiated by imperfect. What did I say that? I didn't mean to say that. Now, but we are imperfect. We're a work in progress in this country. We will never be perfect. Bart Starr, that great quarterback for the Packers, when he coached the Packers, made a great statement. He said, "Perfection is impossible, but excellence is not. And excellence is what happens when you seek perfection every time." So you see, ladies and gentlemen, as we close this thing tonight, as I close this little talk, every time that we stand, look at that flag, sing the national anthem, or pledge allegiance to that flag, take a moment to think about the 1,600,000+ men and women who have given their lives in the defense of freedom and to stamp evil out wherever it may rear its ugly head. And so I'm closing with a poem written by Commander Kelly Strong of the United States Coast Guard. in honor of his father, who was had a career in the United States Marines. And he wrote this poem as a tribute to his dad. I watched the flag pass by that day. It fluttered in the breeze. A young Marine saluted it, and then he stood at ease. I looked at him in his uniform, so young, so tall, so proud. With hair cut short and eyes alert, he'd stand out in any crowd. I thought how many men like him had fallen through the years. How many died on foreign soil, how many mothers' tears. How many pilots planes shot down, how many lost at sea, or died in muddy foxholes. No, freedom isn't free. Each time I hear the sound of taps, when everything is still, I listen to the bugler play and then I feel a chill. I wonder just how many times the taps had meant amen when the flag had draped a coffin of a brother or a friend. I think about the children, the husbands and the wives, fathers, sons and husbands with interrupted lives. I think about a graveyard at the bottom of the sea and the unmarked graves in Arlington. You see, freedom isn't free. May God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and now I would ask that you all please remain standing for the playing of taps.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Please help me thank once again all of our veteran speakers, storytellers, for a wonderful night of compelling stories. And now, please help us build a Fisher House. That will be one of the greatest accomplishments that can come out of tonight's event. Thank you very much for being here. Be safe and good night.